Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order. We'll begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning, or this afternoon. And introducing the panel members, to my left is Cynthia Stevens, and to her left is Tracy Anderson. Representing the City of Winnipeg from the Assessment Department is Mark Colatriglio.
Good enough.
And our recording secretary is Kelsey Harrison. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rule in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicants and the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments on properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to exemptions from application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant. Following the swearing in, we'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then will be the applicant's opportunity and testimony, and then they will be followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicants may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. The order will be sent to you by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. We'll ask our secretary to swear in the assessor and Mr. Trevor Smith.
Would you like to swear in or affirm without?
I can swear in.
Could you please state your name?
Mark Colatriglio.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Could you please state your name?
Trevor Smith.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right, we will go according to the docket that we have here, and the first one is Prevention Boulevard, number 353. Mr. Colatriglio, whenever you're ready.
All right, we're dealing with file number 19-4904. The applicant is Stephen Advisors Ltd. The roll number is 06060863-100. The address is 353 Prevention Boulevard. The owner is Bow Lock Inc. The roll year under appeal is 2020. The assessed value is $1.65 million with a reference date of April 1st of 2018. We have one building on site here with 8 premises. It's a one-story building built in 1986, an effective age of 1986. It's of wood or steel frame construction, C2 zoning, the land area 20,200 square feet, the plan area of 8,036 square feet. The total leasable area on file is 8,000 square feet. If you flip to page 2, you'll see some information in regards to requests for information. The property has responded to all of our requests, so they are compliant. There has been some sale history for this particular property. The most recent sale is April 12th of 2016 at $1.3 million. Just below that, you see some leases that are in place at the subject property, both for approximately $14 a square foot. If you flip the page, you'll see that I've provided some rental comparables from the surrounding area, similar types of retail space. And the range there is from anywhere from $10.52 all the way up to $27.50. If you flip to page 4, you can see the model applied rates for this particular building. It's tagged as a strip mall. Again, there's 8 premises here, total leasable area 8,000 square feet, and the model applies rental ranges from $14.05 upwards of $15.38. So right within the range that we're seeing for comparable properties within the market. The potential rent there is $117,289. We've applied a 4% vacancy rate to get an effective gross income of $112,597. There are 2 components to the non-recoverable expense allowance that we apply to the property. The first being a set 2% allowance, and then we give shortfall for vacancy at $7 a square foot. The total allowance here is just over 4,500 square feet, $4,500, I should say. The net operating income is $108,105, and we've applied a model-driven cap rate at 6.55% for a capitalized value of $1.65 million rounded. I do have a recommendation for this particular file. I'd like to give you guys copies of the workups.
Thank you.
So you can see on the revised workup here that some of the rents were adjusted downwards for this particular property. And I feel that the recommendation at $1.35 million, considering the sale of the property in April of 2016 at $1.3 million, is very fair and reasonable. And there is some additional information. If you flip to page 6, you can see some pictures of the subject property, some aerial photos and top-down view. The property's located right on the corner of Thibault and Provencher. If you flip to page 7, you can see the map view and the Google Street View of this particular property. And if you flip again to page 8, you can see some photos of the parking to the rear of the property off the back lane. Page 9 is the income expense mailer that was submitted by the owner in 2017. They've attached an income statement, which is shown on page 11. There is a partial recovery here for management, but it does not appear to be a full recovery. If you look in the expenses, the total is $12,000. Looks like they partially recover $2,623. If you flip to page 13, you'll see some information regarding the cap rates and some of the outside sources that the city uses to verify the model's accuracy in regards to the cap rate that's applied. In the City of Winnipeg's information for this particular type of property, which we've tagged as a strip mall, the range between the 20th and 80th percentile is 6.4% cap rate all the way up to 7.05. And if you look over to the range indicated by Colliers, CBRE, and Cushman Wakefield, the cap rate. Page 14 is some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. There's nothing too intensive in there. It's just some basic information. We provided the briefs. We do have an addenda that's attached to the back of the brief. And part of the addenda is just explaining what was done in regards to the non-recoverable expense allowance. In previous years, there was a 5% management allowance that was given. That has since been changed. This addenda just provides some information as to the thought process that went into making that decision and some of the evidence that goes to support what was done. On page 2 of the addenda, there's just some additional cap rate information. You can see the table, it's the second from the top. For retail properties, the range in cap rates as analyzed here between 3.1 to 7.4%. And if you flip to page 3 of the addenda, you'll see we did some sampling of the non-recoverable expenses. Looking at various properties, 29 different properties, the median non-recoverable expense net of vacancy shortfall as a percentage of the effective gross income was 1.06%. And at the back, there's some information in regards to the IAAO standards, and that we do conduct assessment to sales ratio analysis when sales occur, and that the model-driven rates do fall within the standards as set by the IAAO. Well, that's it for my presentation. Like I said, I believe that the recommendation at 1.35, considering the sale of the property in April of 2016, is fair and reasonable. Thank you.
I think you misread the figure? The recommendation?
The recommendation is 1.35 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, is that what was said? Okay, sorry. Mr. Smith, are you in agreement with that? Or were you aware of the recommendation?
I hadn't really had a chance to look at it before.
Okay.
Now, so
In looking at your brief, you are substantially lower, so you can either accept it or not accept it.
right.
So, do you need a few minutes?
I think, and I certainly appreciate the city's going through the workup and making the recommendation, but I think we'll proceed with
All right.
The hearing.
All right, so you may ask questions in of the assessor's presentation.
Okay, thank you. With the revised assessment here, we're really, in the end, non-recoverables aside, in the end, we're looking at cap rates, I guess, right? As our differential, largely, between our NOI and yours were fairly similar. When it comes down
Well,
to
we
it.
haven't had a chance to look at yours, so you
Fair
may
enough.
just ask questions
Okay.
of the
Try and
assessor's
be
brief.
efficient
Yeah,
here.
it does look like the cap is the main thing.
So the cap rate is model driven, and that would be largely age and location, I imagine?
Age, location, property type, yeah, are the big drivers of the cap rate.
Okay, condition wouldn't necessarily come into play if it hadn't been viewed. Correct.
Condition is typically part of the modeling process, and it is factored in regards to.
Okay, with regard to the non-recoverable expenses, looking at your addenda, the fresh look section, so if I read this correctly, it's merely stating that the legislation states that fresh assessment has to be done every cycle, essentially. That's what it's saying, right? Which is, so the city is saying that as it's a new cycle, they have the ability to look at it and
Correct.
with fresh eyes. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I do have rebuttal evidence on non-recoverable. I'll be efficient about it. You can do it whenever you would like to see it, Mr. Chair.
Well, we might as well do it now.
Is that just one? Yes. Thank you. So this is for all properties
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
Do you have a copy for me for each file?
If you want to hang on
I-
to those ones.
I can.
Okay, I will
can-
write on mine,
Yeah,
so.
okay.
I promise.
Four, I think there's
You
seven.
can have mine as well.
5, 10. I I will still need 2 more eventually.
Okay.
Um,
You can have mine,
Okay.
I won't write on mine either.
If-
5, 6.
How many
There's
do you
7
need?
in total.
How many do you need?
I have 5.
You have
here.
5?
Yeah.
So I have it scanned, I can give you.
So,
I
If
don't
you don't-
need it
if you don't-
today, but
if-
just in the,
yeah, if you don't write on yours, she's got one,
5
and we
in
won't
total.
write on ours, okay? You'll be okay,
Okay,
okay?
I'll still need 2.
I'll get to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so just with regard to, the non-recoverable expenses, and I'll keep this as concise as I can. City of Winnipeg Assessment Department, going back in time from 2006 forwards, has had a standard methodology of dealing with non-recoverable expenses. There's 3 components of that. One which we won't deal with, that's the shortfall rate, that's accepted, that's the expenses the owner incurs for vacant space. That's not at issue here, so we'll leave that aside. The other 2 parts are the 5%, what was termed management allowance by the City of Winnipeg, and then there was a 2% other allowance. In my more than a decade, I guess, presenting before the Board of Revision, it's been stated by numerous assessors before the board that the 2% other was with reference to the structural allowance for the properties, and the 5% was just termed management. So this methodology carried forward from 2006 through the 2018 cycle. Subsequently, the city has changed that methodology for 2020. I will get into a little bit in my brief, so I won't touch that component with regard to the appraisal, education, and standards for non-recoverables. I'll do that in my brief, but with regard to the city's methodology, again, they've followed a standard methodology right up until the current time. I see that they have the ability to look at it with fresh eyes, but that doesn't necessarily change the correct methodology. We're seeing a drop from an overall 7% non-recoverable down to 2%. The issue there is the 5%, what was termed management, was always intended to capture non-recoverable costs that any owner faces with regard to a property that they cannot recover from the tenant, which again I will cover in more depth in my brief. So what I'm showing you here today in my rebuttal evidence is a couple of things. We're looking at the province of Manitoba and their current methodology for 2020, as well as their past methodology with regard to non-recoverables. So if you look at the first page in the brief, you can see this is a hearing that I just attended in the city of Brandon with regard to an investment property out there. The second page, number 9 at the bottom. If you flip to that, you can see that the management allowance is still 5% here, and the other allowance is still 2% here. So the province of Manitoba continues using the same methodology as they had in the past and as the city had in the past. If you go forward, I have 2 other jurisdictions, Saskatchewan as well as Ontario. If you flip to what is numbered, page number 69, you can see that this is, again, the province of Saskatchewan and their methodology. They describe how they arrive at the net operating income. And in order to arrive at net operating income, they state even on a net rental basis. However, there are two areas where the property owner must cover expenses: non-recoverable expenses, non-recoverable operating expenses, that being expenses that are not passed on to the tenants, and vacant space shortfall. The effective gross income must be reduced by the amounts of non-recoverable operating expenses and vacant space shortfall. So what's included in non-recoverable operating expenses? They list a number of items there that the city does not include in their consideration for the 2%. Moving on, we have the Province of Ontario Municipal Property Assessment Corporation that runs assessment in Ontario. They follow the same methodology. I will get you to flip to what's numbered, page number 69. And the highlighted portion at the bottom of the page, 3.3, establishing NOI. It says, the final step is to adjust the income for expenses that cannot be recovered from tenants. Following that, on the next page, they have an example of how to arrive at NOI. Now, this is an example, so we're not relying on their percentage applied, but you do get the idea. Total effective gross income less total non-recoverable expenses equals your net operating income. And following that, we have a number of decisions from the current cycle, 2020, that were before the board here in the 2020 cycle, where the decisions taken specifically state that the 5% non-recoverable allowance was added back into the decision in arriving at the net operating income. 5% plus the 2% that is already included. So we have 183 Kennedy Street, 650 Main Street, and the final page, 460 Higgins Avenue. And I believe I have one more in my brief as presented. So essentially, the city is not following the standardized methodology in allowing this particular non-recoverable expense allowance. They've compressed their expense allowance from an overall rate of 7% down to 2%. That's a significant valuation change, and does not match what other jurisdictions within Canada are doing with regard to the treatment of non-recoverable operating expenses in determining net operating income. And I'm open for questions on that.
Thank you. Mr. Coltrevio?
I do have a few questions. So on page 9, this is a brief or a workup from the provincial assessor, is that correct?
That is correct.
And they list the management as a management expense and not as a non-recoverable, correct?
That is the terminology that they have assigned to it, yes.
Okay.
Just with regard to the management, and I perhaps didn't mention this, it's not in reference to a property management fee. As we all know, property management fees are typically recovered from tenants that are on net leases, so by and large you do get that back, with the exception of some government tenancies or gross leases or semi-gross leases, things of that nature.
Okay, on page, I believe this is Saskatchewan's handbook, numbered 69 in the rebuttal here. Between page 69 and the next page, which is 71, it looks like we're missing a chunk. The non-recoverable operating expenses, do you have an indication of like the full list of what they typically show in their documents as to what would not be recovered by a tenant under a standard lease? They listed legal and audit fees and structural repairs and repairs that are capital in nature.
Right, I'm afraid I don't have the entire document included, so I don't have the full list that they specifically refer to.
Okay.
But we'll deal with that in my brief as well.
Sure. Do you know the percentage that Saskatchewan applies?
I'm afraid I don't. I haven't, I don't have any properties that I'm currently representing in that jurisdiction.
Okay. And we look at the impact document that's included here. Again, I don't see any set percentage. Are you aware of the percent that they apply for non-recoverables in Ontario?
I'm not currently aware of what they are, and as far as the percentage that they apply. I do know that in the past it was very similar to Manitoba in the percentage that was applied. If you look at the if you look at the examples that are provided on 69 and 71, I think while they're examples, they probably give you some indication of the percentage that may be applicable in that jurisdiction.
Okay, but you don't know for sure.
I do not know for sure.
Gotcha. And then just in regards to the border revision orders, are you aware that there have been other orders where the 5% has not been added back in?
Yes, and I believe every one of those is under appeal at the municipal board at this point.
Yeah. And that was everything. Other questions on the rebuttal?
I thank you. Ms. Stevens, any questions in regards to the rebuttal information?
No, thanks.
Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
I think you were finished with your questions in regards to the assessor, so Ms. Stevens, any questions in regards to the assessor's brief?
Just a couple. I know that the cap rate is, appears, well, and it's non-recoverable, but just in the rents that you lowered, were those based on actuals or?
It was just based on a review of the condition of the property.
Okay.
So just reviewing market rents and then looking at the condition of that particular property and seeing that it probably falls on the lower end of the range.
Okay,
And so the rents for the non-corner units were adjusted.
the non-corner units. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
And because at the beginning of your brief, you had 2 of the rents, but that was all, right, for the space?
Sorry.
You had the subway rent and the,
Yeah, correct. So
the
this,
rest of them you didn't have.
they may be semi-gross leases.
Okay.
We only show the net leases
Yeah,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
And on your, at the back of your, on the non-recoverable page, you've got, it's page 3 at the back of your addendum there.
Sure.
So the properties you show there, are any of those retail, like the property, like the kind of type of property we're seeing today with the non-recoverable?
Yes, so, we've tagged this property under the parcel use of a neighborhood shopping center, which we tag as CMRNS.
CMRNS, okay.
The cap rate that we apply comes from the designation of this property as a strip mall. But if you look, any CMRNS rate
Maybe a
is
similar type of property?
similar. Maybe the form of the building itself might vary a little, but they would be typically retail properties, yeah.
That's all I had, thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Anderson?
No questions for the assessor, thank you.
So it's, the presentation that is done by the assessment department is strictly model driven?
In this instance, for this particular file, everything here is model driven, yeah.
All right. Mr. Smith, we're ready for your presentation, sir.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Looking at, pardon me, looking at the city's revised valuation, net operating income, they come down to $88,413. Our net income is $87,070, so we're very similar with regard to the net operating income, so I certainly appreciate the city looking at that aspect.
Which page is your work up on?
It's on page number 17.
17, thank you.
Yeah. So you can see that we're in close proximity. However, it is, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but it is important that the method of arriving there gets addressed and included in the decisions that come out as well, so that there's clear direction with regard to this non-recoverable issue, which is a point of contention going forward in basically all briefs that are not multifamily, that are done by the income model. So with regard to the subject property, I'll be very efficient here. There was a 2018 decision reducing the value from $1,502,000 to $1,284,000. I was not in agreement with that, but the owner decided that they did not want to pay the fee to the municipal board, so it was not appealed at that time. The subject property itself is shown on pages 5 through 8. If you look at the interior photos, you can see a couple of examples of the older section of, well, the building's all the same age, but there's been no renovations to the center section of the building, so basically the two end caps have had some degree of renovation, and they have net leases at $14. The rest of it is on a gross, semi-gross basis, so their actual returns are very low, and in fact don't support the purchase price of the property at $1.3 million. The finishes are old, the access is poor, the roof needs repair, etc. There's significant issues with regard to the property. Beyond that, they have difficulty drawing tenants to this space, and indeed that's reflected in the rental rates that they get. So moving on to the value, if we look at page number 12, the actual semi-gross leases are there, as well as the two net rents of $14 for the end caps. You can see that the semi-gross rents, once they're brought back to net, range from $4.34 up to $9.10 once you deduct the operating costs from those net amounts. Pardon me. So the actual income for the property is on a net basis is $82,495 if the property is fully leased. So we've provided some rent comparables. I won't go through those. What I have done to estimate market value for the property is apply a $12 net rent to the semi-gross spaces. So that's probably a bit on the generous side. However, it is what we have used, and it gives us a final market value of $101,720. Moving on to page number 14 and the expense side of the equation. We've used a 5% market vacancy. There is data there to support that if you wish to read it. Moving on to the non-recoverable expenses. So we'll go through this part once that deals with all the properties today, and we can just address it up front. A 2% allowance for replacement reserve of effective gross income is utilized by the City of Winnipeg in estimating an expense allowance, which we are in agreement with and utilize in our analysis. The city is using the 2% to encompass all of the non-recoverable expenses. In the past, that has been specific to structural reserves, or replacement reserve essentially. The City of Winnipeg has utilized 5% management expense allowance for prior assessment cycles, as shown by the City of Winnipeg documentation in the addenda of this report. For the 2020 assessment cycle, this has been eliminated in the city analysis. I'd like to address up front the management issue. It was never intended to be a property management allowance, as stated. The city and ourselves know that property management is an expense that is typically recovered from tenancies. So that was never what that allowance was for. It was for the management of the property and the non-recoverable expenses that a tenant would not pay for through their standard lease terms. The Appraisal Institute of Canada is the governing body of the property appraisal profession in Canada. It is responsible for provision of education to its membership through a partnership with UBC. Standard appraisal text provided to students, candidate members, is the Appraisal of Real Estate, 3rd Canadian edition. And in reference to the income approach to value, it states in Chapter 21, the formula for the calculation of the net operating income is summarized as follows. Potential gross income minus vacancy and collection loss, also known as vacancy and bad debt allowance, equals effective gross income, minus operating expenses that are paid by the landlord, equals net operating income. So they specifically state operating expenses that are paid by the landlord. The reference to operating expenses that are paid by the landlord refers to non-recoverable operating expenses, or expenses that cannot be recovered from the tenants of a property through the standard operating expense recoveries through the lease documentation, their legal obligations. These non-recoverable operating expenses are standard expenses incurred by a property and serve to reduce the overall NOI income to the owner. Standard non-recoverable operating expenses include expense categories such as, but not limited to, the following. Professional fees, legal, accounting, other professional fees, asset management, landlord work. Landlord work is work that can be required for a unit to be brought to shell space or brought to the point where the tenant can do the improvements to the space for their fit out. Leasing commissions. Obviously tenants are not going to pay the landlord's leasing commissions. Tenant improvements. Tenant improvements are also a non-recoverable operating expense that the landlord has to provide in many circumstances. It's a competitive market. They have to provide tenant improvement allowance in order for the tenant to move in and fit out the space to their specifications. And that's an expense that the owner incurs and bears themselves. Owner repair and maintenance, exclusive of structural repair. Marketing of the property, tenant inducements, these being items such as free rent, etc. Often there is a, as mentioned, it is a competitive market, and the landlord often has to provide free rent up front in order to draw the tenant to their property versus another. We have credit checks, and finally we have property management fees in some cases. Generally they're recovered from tenancies, but when you have government tenants or some semi-gross leases, sometimes you do not get those fees recovered from the tenants. So those are the categories in general that are looked at as non-recoverable. So as this is a significant issue with regard to valuation in this current cycle, we at Stevenson Advisors conducted a 3-year historical review of properties where we had full access to year-end income and expense statements, rent rolls, etc. And we did a study in order to determine the percentage of effective gross income that the non-recoverables formed on a per property basis. We did this over a 3-year period, 2016 through 2018. And we did it in two different tranches, I guess. We did, as you can see in the left-hand column, we did non-recoverable expenses exclusive of tenant inducements, so that being, or tenant improvements rather, that being the money paid by the landlord to build out the space for the tenant. And then in the right-hand column, we have non-recoverable expenses where the tenant improvements were included in the calculations. And the far right-hand column, you can see the number of properties that were included in each year's study, varying between 45 and 53 properties that were reviewed. Again, we had full documentation on these properties. So, as you can see, over that three-year span, the non-recoverable expenses exclusive of tenant improvement allowance ranged between an average of 9.6% and 13.5%. Non-recoverable expenses inclusive of tenant improvements ranged between 10.6% and 14.2%. The three-year averages being 11.5% and 12.7%. Now, clearly, this establishes that those non-recoverable expenses are a significant impact to the net income that an owner does receive. These are standard expenses that are across the board for all property categories. And they do need to be recognized in the valuation. The city's move from 7% to 2% is essentially disregarding the vast majority of non-recoverable operating expenses and coming down to a net income. The valuation methodology in theory is very clear on this. It's taught by the Appraisal Institute of Canada in this method. It's used by other assessment jurisdictions within Canada in the same manner. The City of Winnipeg itself used it. The province still uses it. We have essentially one exception where the city has made a change to their valuation model. So what we're asking for today is a reinstitution of that 5% non-recoverable allowance. We're not seeking on an individual basis each property's actual 1 year allowance is obviously that's going to vary. We're simply seeking the reinstitution of that 5% non-recoverable allowance in addition to the 2% structural component. Back to our valuation. The shortfall allowance, while lower than what the property actually has, we have deferred to the city's shortfall of $7 a square foot. And we can move on to capitalization. Page number 16, we present our capitalization rate study. These are retail properties within the city of Winnipeg. They're investment properties. They were purchased for their return to the investor, and they are all relatively recent in nature. You can see that they vary somewhat in size, and we have a cap rate range running from 7.1% with kind of a concentration in that 7.1 to 7.6% range, and then one higher one at 9.1%. The subject property itself, as stated, has very dated finishes in the interior units. It's operating on a semi-gross basis that many investors would need to change. It has very poor unit sizes and layout, essentially, with that L-shaped layout. It has an inferior location and somewhat poor curb appeal for tenants as well, which is evidenced by the difficulty in drawing tenants to the property. So we have used a capitalization rate of 7.75% based on this analysis. And looking at page 17, it summarizes our value, coming down to a value of $1,123,000. Now again, the actual NOI that they get is dramatically lower than this, and we have applied a net rental rate of $12 to those interior units. Again, that's probably on the generous side, but the overall value I feel is appropriate at $1,123,000. And the addendum materials include the income and expense for the subject property, cap rate reports, as well as an additional decision that reflects the inclusion of the capitalization, or of the 5% non-recoverable expense. So again, in putting out your decision, we would certainly like the non-recoverable aspect to be addressed in the order that is put out. Open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Questions of the applicant?
I do. I also have some rebuttal evidence to enter as well. I don't know if you want it before or after I.
After.
Sure. Just give me 1 moment. So I'm looking at page 14 and 15 of the brief. Included in the analysis on page 15 would be asset management, correct?
Yes, for those properties that had an asset management fee.
Okay.
The majority of them did not.
Leasing commissions, and then you covered the 2 different sets of numbers for the tenant improvements,
Correct.
Yeah, and it's the tenant inducements, free rent, et cetera, that's all included in this?
The TI that's referred to there is tenant improvements, so that's
Okay.
the build out, not the inducements.
Gotcha. Okay, and you've used the art. In regards to page 16, the cap rate information that's shown, is this just a small sample of a larger cap rate study, or was this the only analysis done in regards to retail cap rates?
These were the most appropriate ones where they were true investment sales where they were marketed broadly, had adequate time for investors to look at them, and were sold in a competitive environment where they were purchased for the income. There are others, but these were the most appropriate ones.
Okay. And then just in the back where we look at the outside sources cap rate studies, first you show Q1 2016 Colliers. Would you classify this as a strip mall?
Yes, it is a strip mall.
Yeah, so they show a range here of between 6 and 7.
So, which page are we on here?
Page 8, and that would be Q1 2016 Colliers cap rate study for retail.
Right, they're showing a range of 6 to 7% for investment grade properties. Again, and I know this wasn't asked, but the cap rate studies as put out by CBRE and Colliers are reflective of the top of the market, the investment grade properties that are sold, and it's the broker's impression of what investor demand is for that property type.
Okay. I believe that was all of my questions.
All right, Ms. Stevens?
Just sort of a general question about the condition. I mean, you've shown some pictures and things here, so because, I mean, there is a sale there.
Yep.
That is not too far off time-wise and is quite a bit more than what you've come up with here. So what's, in your mind, what's the issue there?
Well,
is it the property itself? Is it the way it's, is it the tenancy, current tenancy? Is it the way it's managed? Is it all the above? Is it?
It's the property itself that drives it. So with regard to the purchase, this is, if you look at the name of the owner, Bowlock Inc., he's new Canadian. I believe this was his first investment purchase, so he's not a sophisticated investor. He was simply looking to get into the market. He paid what he paid the income for the property does not support that, that value. So while it is a valid sale, I don't believe that it's reflective of market. But in terms of the value for the property, if you look at the tenancies that are there, they're all kind of mom and pop type of local tenancies. The space is poorly configured, generally smaller than most retail tenants would need in the modern age, poorly furnished, and just the overall curb appeal is poor. There are better locations and better options in the immediate area as well. So as a tenant, you would typically look for a space that would drive the most business, and this would generally not be that because of the configuration and the furnishings, etc. So it's the building, not the management.
Okay.
It is professionally managed.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Tracy?
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, just an observation. I guess looking at the cap rate for the subject property, and you're using the 7 3/4, and I'm just looking at page 16, and it almost looks like it should be a little lower for the subject in regards to a cap rate. I'm looking at, probably maybe using a cap rate of 7.5 compared to, so I'm just wondering why you're up up a little higher in regards to, settling at 7 3/4.
Absolutely. So the capitalization rate chart that's shown on page number 16, they're generally these properties, perhaps with the exception of Phillips was a special circumstance, but looking at the other sales there, certainly the first property is a better property, better located, better tenanted. That transacted in 2018, 7.5 cap rate. The Gateway property is, well, similar in size, also superior. If you move down the list, we have another Osborne property at 7.4%. Again, that, in my mind, would be superior to the subject. So we're looking at it in relation to the market itself, which is why I'm at 7.75. But I do see your point.
I guess the fact that, they're not, the comparables aren't really in the area. I guess, it's in the subject's in St. Boniface, so maybe you're saying that location-wise it might be inferior, I don't know. Anyways,
So the first one is right in Osborne Village.
yeah. There's a lot to digest here.
Yes.
And your end results are like $1,000 apart in regards to NOI. So how you got there, it's congratulations. Anyways, that's all my questions. You have rebuttal information?
I do, yeah. I'll try to keep it brief as well. I know you guys have probably heard a lot of this stuff.
Oh, thank you. I think two members of probably the board have heard this. I'm not sure whether you have.
I have not heard this one yet, but that's okay.
Okay.
I can read. Thank you.
You may proceed, sir.
Thank you. So, just starting with the introduction again. We're required to do a fresh reassessment every, in this wording it shows 4 years, it's since been revised to 2 years. But we do a full review of the parameters that are applied to a particular property through the model for properties across the city. Every reassessment, we review that stuff. This cycle, we have taken a new stance in regards to the management fee that was applied. Previously it was 5, but just because we've done something one way in the past doesn't mean we're bound to do it that way going forward. And if we are reviewing information submitted by the owners to the city, and we're seeing that on average, or in regards to a median, we're showing a lower rate than what was previously allowed. That's part of the conversation when we're deciding on what things to include as part of the model. So it is important to understand that the non-recoverable expense allowance does include two portions. There is a set 2% that's applied, and then the shortfall allowance per square foot, and that's to account for any non-recoverable expenses during times of vacancy. So there are two components, and the model does deal with them differently depending on the vacancy that is in place for a particular property. The total non-recoverable allowance is the combination of the two. It's not just the 2%. So you do have to factor in that there is the shortfall, and Mr. Smith's not disputing the shortfall allowance. On page 3, you'll see that Stevenson, in the narrative report by Stevenson, it's indicated that standard non-recoverable operating expenses include expense categories such as, but not limited to, professional fees, asset management, landlord work, leasing commissions, tenant improvements, owner repair and maintenance, marketing, tenant inducements, credit checks, property management. It's the department's position that some of these items, the inclusion of some of these items are contrary to some decisions that have been made at the municipal board. And we do have some orders, and that's primarily what this rebuttal document is just detailing some of the municipal board decisions that clearly state that certain things are not to be included. So the first example at the bottom of page 3 is from file number 97A1-076. And I'll read it. This question has been dealt with by the board in several recent orders, in particular Municipal Board Order A-94-196 dealing with the Richardson building, where it was indicated considerable evidence was heard concerning the effect on value of tenant inducements. The respondent ultimately abandoned the position that the value should be reduced to reflect tenant inducements. And Municipal Board Order A-97065, the board is satisfied that it is not proper to reduce the value to reflect tenant inducements. The board reiterates that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce the income for the purposes of calculating market value. So very clearly in the Municipal Board Order, they're suggesting that we ought not to include tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives. So in our analysis of those non-recoverable items, those things have been removed from the non-recoverable list of allowable line items. It's the same thing in regards to free rent. So if you flip to page 4, there's some additional board decisions here where it also reiterates that tenant improvements, leasing commissions, leasing incentives are not to be used. Flip to page 5. There's some information in regards to asset management. An asset management fee is a fee that would be incurred based on a specific type of ownership. Not all properties would incur asset management fees, and it would be solely based on the owner's requirements as to if they need to hire someone to manage their portfolio or not. So if you look at about 3/4 of the way down, there's a little blurb from the Appraisal Institute, or from the Appraisal Real Estate 3rd edition. And it's a very popular appraisal textbook. At the back of this package, I actually have an excerpt from the textbook. And basically we're looking at the footnote at the bottom. And what it says there is actual property management should be distinguished from asset management. Large investment grade properties are often held as part of a portfolio that include both securities and real estate. The managers of these portfolios make critical decisions concerning when to acquire a real estate asset, how to finance, or when to refinance, and when to reposition a property in the market. Though their roles are distinct, the functions of a property manager and asset manager may sometimes be intertwined. Asset management fees should not be included among the items enumerated as operating expenses for real property. So it's pretty clear in the textbook not to use asset management as part of a non-recoverable expense analysis. In the back of this, there's the full board orders that deal with these particular excerpts from the front part of the thing. I won't go through them, you guys can comb over them if you like. But basically, the gist of the rebuttal evidence is that there are certain things that are included in the Stevenson analysis that ought not to be, as ordered by the municipal board and also as indicated by the Appraisal of Real Estate 3rd edition textbook. And that was everything for the rebuttal.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes. So in the material presented here, you've identified a couple of things I'd like to review. So I believe you had asked me if asset management was included in our study.
Correct, yeah.
And I had indicated that it was, but it was on exceptionally few properties within that study. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't recall a number or anything, but yeah.
A very low figure in any case. I don't have the number for you, but it's not a lot. The middle of the page number 3 that you have there, you've identified 4 expense categories. So leasing commissions. Is that an expense that a landlord typically incurs in leasing space?
It could be,
Investment
yeah,
property?
yeah, it could be if they're using a leasing agent and they need to pay commission out.
And is generally in the market, is a leasing agent utilized to lease space?
That's fairly common.
Okay. And could it reasonably be expected for a tenant to pay the leasing commissions for the landlord to put themselves in a unit?
No.
Is that logical?
I mean, typically it would be an expense incurred by the landlord.
Okay. Same thing for tenant inducements, free rent. If it's free rent, obviously the tenant is not going to pay for that, correct?
Correct, yeah, that's a decision that would be made by the owner of the property or the landlord.
The tenant improvement allowance, that's an allowance provided by the ownership to the tenant, so the tenant is not paying for that, correct?
Correct.
As well as free rent. I haven't had a great deal of time to review the decisions that are provided, but I was looking at the page number 4 and the order at the top. So it's talking about reducing the income. Now, is that reducing property back to net effective rate rather than the face rate? Is that what's being referred to there, or?
I believe it would be in reducing the effective gross income down to an NOI. But I mean, I could be mistaken. I don't have the.
So we haven't really had time to go through these decisions and see what specifically is referred to, correct?
It seems pretty clear that they're suggesting that when you're doing an income-based valuation, you have to go through a process. And part of that process is looking at your potential gross income, establishing a market vacancy, getting an effective gross income, and then applying some expense allowance. But again, it's pretty clear here that those particular items should not be included in that process of reducing the income down into an NOI.
I hear you. So I'm going to try and be very concise here, Mr. Chair. When a tenant improvement allowance is provided and a tenant pays a face rate of, for example, $20, is it the city's practice to reduce that number down to a net effective rate, deducting the tenant improvement allowance out of that rental rate?
No, the rates are modeled, so they don't use the actual financials for one particular property to determine adjustments to the rents.
So essentially, that rate has been bought up from a standard rate by the tenant improvement van, correct? And logically, that expense should be allowed on the other side if it's not allowed on the income side, right? If you don't allow it on the income side of the ledger, it should be allowed on the expense side.
Right, but
That's
the
it.
municipal board
It's
has been
in
very
balance.
clear about it, right?
So,
That's
just
the
with
crux of
regard
the
to the municipal board, the city's aware that the board of revision is not bound by the decisions of the municipal board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And, 2 points, I guess. What was the 5% management for in past cycles then?
It's my understanding that it was a 5% management,
Representing
property management. That's my understanding of it. Now, I was not around in previous cycles when other assessors may have spoken to different components that had gone into the overall allowance, but it's my understanding that it was a management for property management and that the 2% other was to encompass the other non-recoverable expenses that would be incurred by the landlord or the owner.
Those are all my questions, thank you.
Well, thank you. Ms. Stevens, any
No,
questions?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Tracy, any questions?
No, thank you.
Summation if you want?
Just that the recommendation that I've made, I think is fair and reasonable when you look at the actual sale of the property. I don't think anything that's been modeled here is unreasonable. I think the rents are appropriate, and I think the cap rate is appropriate as well.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I'll keep the summary to 1 point. I think it's very unlikely that the city would make a 5% error over the course of 12 or 14 years or more, however long this model has been running with a standard expense allowance when, as we all know, property management fees are recoverable from tenants. So the terminology is what the problem was. It's not that the expenses were not valid and the quantum of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to the second property. 1573 Region Avenue West. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Just give me one moment.
Okay.
Okay. So we're dealing with file number 19-1545. The applicant is Stevenson Advisors Ltd. Roll number 0900-775-1000. The address is 1573 Region Avenue West. The class and liability is split in this particular instance. There is a portion at $780,000 for the class code 40 institutional property, and that's exempt. And we have the class code 60 for other property, which is taxable at $9,437,000. Total assessed value here is $10,217,000. This property is a neighborhood shopping center, 4 buildings with a 5th building, I believe, that was built and it's been completed and it's even had some occupancy up until this point, but it's not reflected in the current work up here. That's some work that will need to be done prior to the end of the year, and a supplemental for this particular property will need to be issued, as there's a new leasable area that needs to be included in the analysis. But there's an actual year build ranges from 1986 to 2016, so there are some newer components to the property. Construction class is wood or steel frame, exterior walls, C2 community zoning, commercial community zoning. Land area, 159,929 square feet. The plan area, 34,488 square feet. Total leasable area that we have is 33,906 square feet. So again, that'll need to be revised to reflect the new building that's being constructed there, or was constructed there. Page 2, you'll see that the subject property responded to all of our requests for information, so it is compliant. There's no sales history for this particular subject property. And at the bottom of page 2 there, you'll see that the subject property has a variety of net leases in place, and they range from as low as $10.05 up to $41 for the Starbucks. Page 3, I've provided a fairly large list of rent comparables. They range here from $15.25 all the way up to $40.69, and that's another. So the subject property has been valued again based on model parameters. If you flip to page 4, first chunk that we see is the income stream regarding neighborhood shopping center dealing with class code 40 exempt. So there is, I believe, a daycare or nursery in place here, and that's the exempt portion. So 5,233 square feet. We've applied a rental rate of $11.90. The potential rent there, $62,273. 4% vacancy is applied, and 2% for the non-recoverable allowance, and shortfall at $8 a square foot. $56,000 and $56,911 for the NOI, and the cap rate used is 7.30. The capitalized value is $779,603, rounded to $780,000 for that particular portion. Then we do have a restaurant income stream, and this is for the Starbucks. The leasable area there is $16.50, and we've applied a modeled rent of $43.08. The potential rent there is $71,082. 3% vacancy given on the restaurant portion, 2% non-recoverable allowance, and shortfall at $750 a square foot. NOI here is $67,200. The cap rate for the restaurant portion is 6.35%. And the capitalized value is rounded at $1,058,000. Page 6, you'll see the remainder, and this is where the majority of the premises fall under. We've got 27,023 square feet of leasable area. The rental ranges applied by the model varies from as low as $18.27 all the way up to $35.93. 4% vacancy again on the neighborhood shopping center. This is the 60T portioning. 2% non-recoverable allowance, shortfall again at $8 a square foot. The total allowance here for non-recoverables is just over $21,000, and net operating income is $611,645. Overall cap rate 7.3, capitalized value rounded at $8.3,079,000. So on page 7, you'll just see the summary of the income valuation for the various components for a total estimated market value at $10,217,000. Blended cap rate used is 7.2, and the NOI for the overall property $735,756. Page 8, you'll see some photos of the subject property. You can see the northwestern corner, there's a building there. That's the new building that was constructed, and that needs to be assessed, so that's not included in the current figures. And if you look at page 9, you'll see some street view photos of the subject property, along with page 10 just shows some of the CRUs that are more in the rear of the property. Page 11 is the income and expense information as submitted by the owner. And They don't really fill it out, but what they do is they provide the income statement, as you can see on page 13. So here we can see that free rent, $27,000. Again, we're suggesting that so it's not to be, when you're analyzing this particular property, the value that we've come up with is modeled, but if you're gonna dive into the specifics of this property, there is a free rent component that we would suggest that you would need to add back into the revenue. You're conducting analysis of the non-recoverables. On page 14 and 15, you can see the remainder of the non-recoverable expense category. The only thing really that, when we're looking at this sort of information, is we would question the refinancing fees being included, and probably would want to look at some additional information in regards to the parking expenses that are there. But again, we are applying a sizable adjustment for non-recoverables at around $22,000, as you can see on the earlier workup. Page 17 or 18, 19, that's just the rent roll for the subject property, goes all the way to page 22. Page 23 is the building permit that needs to be processed. So as you can see, it's issued December 4th of 2017, and the Amanda status indicates closed. So the permit guys have closed the permit on their end of things. So this is something that needs to be factored in, and if you see the declared construction value there is at $1.25 million. If you flip to page 24, you can see the building's blueprints. The total area that's being added is 6,048 square feet. Again, page 25 just has some cap rate information. Neighborhood shopping center. This falls at the 80th percentile, but between the 20th, which is 7.15, and the 80th for the city stuff, 7.3. CBRE suggests lower rate for neighborhood shopping, 6.5 to 7. And I won't cover the addenda stuff. I think we've gone over it for the first file. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Smith?
So the new portion or the new construction on the site, that will be dealt with a supplemental assessment, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So there's really no, it has no bearing on today, correct? It
Uh,
exists and it will be covered in a supplemental. It does not need to be addressed today, correct?
Correct. The value in question will likely change for 2020 in full.
Of course.
But that'll happen at a future
Yes,
date, yeah.
a supplemental will be issued and we'll
Correct.
deal with it at that time.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. You had mentioned the non-recoverables on page number 15 of your addenda there. You can, is the city aware that many investors will spread their non-recoverable expenses out over a number of years, so it will show as a depreciation number, parking lot depreciation, tenant improvement depreciation, etc. So it's a spreading of that cost over a period of time. You had mentioned, I think, mortgage interest or financing.
Refinancing fees.
Clearly, that would never be included in what we would include in non-recoverables, correct? As a financing aspect, it's
Correct.
simply not allowable.
Yep.
Right. So that's never in question. We would not include that in our materials. The valuation is model-driven entirely, is it?
Correct.
And if an investor was to buy this, they get the entire income of the property, right? They don't buy this portion and that portion and this portion, right?
Correct, yeah.
It's one acquisition, correct?
Correct.
Okay, those are all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I don't think so, no, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Colatriglio, the last assessment was reduced by the board. and it went to the municipal board, and it sits at the municipal board. I just want to know who took it to the municipal board.
I couldn't tell you, don't have the information with me, not sure if Trevor knows.
Over?
But we as the appellant did.
Okay, thank you. We're ready for your presentation, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you. So 1573 Regent Avenue West, you can see a nice picture of it from the frontage on Regent Avenue. Gives you an indication of what we're looking at there. There's a number of buildings on site. We flip to my page number 1. There's a bit of background on it. Yes, the 2018 assessment was reduced marginally, and we have appealed that decision to the municipal board and it awaits scheduling at this time. Our value obviously was under that value at that time. I believe the property has been added to since that time, so you can see the magnitude change in our value for this cycle. Building so far, was originally built in '86. There's been new components added, obviously up to the present day, with one to be added by a supplemental, which will be dealt with at the appropriate time. We have a total leasable area of just under 34,000 square feet. Property is well located on Regent and is in good overall condition. There's some photos of it beginning on page number 2, some exteriors, some interiors of a few of the units. And there is a mix of national retail as well as more local, local service-oriented tenancies as well within the property itself. So it's not all national tenancies of that nature. Further description of the site is on page number 7, as well as an aerial of the layout. And the location is shown on page number 8 to the east of that Regent Avenue interchange on the north-hand side of Regent. It's not adjacent to, say, the Home Depot and Walmart where the power center is. It's on the north side of the road. So moving on to the valuation itself, page number 11 gives you the actual leases in place and the net rental rates for the subject property. You can see the use for each of those units on the right-hand side, and we provide a total of the annual rent at the bottom. Lease rates range from a low of $9.55, that being the daycare center in the unit itself. It's located in the, I believe, in the L corner of it, and has had very little improvement done to it. Up to that $29 plus range, 26. There's a couple of units at 38 where we have some chain restaurants and a coffee outlet as well. As I indicated in my questioning, when you buy the property, you're buying the entire property. You're not buying an office stream and a Starbucks stream and a CRU stream. You're buying the entire property. The investor looks at the acquisition of the asset as a whole. They don't apply separate cap rates to individual components. So it's the cap rate is applied to the entire income stream. So moving on to page 12, we are looking at some rental rate comparables for the subject property. It is well tenanted, a lot of recent leases, and the leases do carry forward beyond the valuation date. So the in-place income is representative of market. It's well supported by the rental comps that we provide here. And the indication that they would get more money for it when you purchase the property, the rents in place are the valid rents in place. They're legally binding contracts. This is what an investor would acquire if they were to buy the property at the valuation date. So you feel free to go through the rents as you wish. I can discuss them if you want. Some of the ones at the bottom are very recent in that Waverly West area on Northtown, etc. So good indications that the actual leases are representative of market at the valuation date itself. We've provided a couple of comps with regard to the daycare rent. $10.85, $8.67 a square foot. These are both daycares one on Colony Street, right next to downtown, and one on Victor Lewis, just off of Waverly. So we believe that the in-place rental rates are at market and are appropriate. Again, if you're to buy the asset, you would not be receiving more income, more potential income than this. We, again, are looking at the property as a whole. Our vacancy stats are shown at the top of page 14 with average strip centers at 3.9% on a single year in 2017, with a 5-year average of 4.6%, and an overall retail vacancy rate of 5.9%. We've applied a 5% vacancy to the property as a whole. I won't run through our expense allowance again, other than to note that we are looking for 5% non-recoverable expenses as well as 2% non-recoverable structural expenses, in addition to the standard shortfall allowance, in keeping with the decisions before the board and the past history of the city of Winnipeg. Moving on to capitalization rate. Again, our cap rates are shown on page number 17. These are properties that we have gone through ourselves as a firm and verified the information. These properties are investment properties, and they were purchased at the cap rates indicated for the revenue stream that they produce. They're sold between 2015 and 2018, ranging from a low of $925,000 up to $5,450,000. Pardon me. Looking at the subject itself, it is well tenanted. It is well located. The one thing I would note is having been fully built out at this point, there's really very little opportunity for upside here in improving the return to the investor. So looking at the caps that are shown there, again, we have a cluster in that 7.5% range. We have applied cap rate of 7.3% to the property as a whole. For the benefit of the board members, I have broken it out in the same manner that the city has. We're not valuing it in that way, but in order to compare it easily, if you look at page number 18, you can see the breakout in the same manner that the city has done. The city of Winnipeg's valuation is in the middle of the page. Ours is at the top, and the city of Winnipeg's 2018 is shown at the very bottom of that page. So again, one capitalization rate should be applied to the property as a whole. This is standard appraisal practice as well. So using our 7.3% cap rate for the various combined income streams, we come to a Class 60 value of $8,695,000 and a Class 40 value of $608,000. So that's adding the two retail streams and taking the exempt portion, the daycare, out at $608,000. And the addendum materials are the same as in the last brief. And I'm open for questions.
So of the cap rates there, you indicated that they all are investment properties, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that of the two, I believe a couple were from 2018, and would suggest a range between 7.1 and 7.5, correct?
Correct.
The blended rate that we've applied for the overall property is 7.2%, so you agree that that falls within the range?
I would agree that 7.2 falls within the range, but I haven't done the calculation to look at whether, what the overall cap was as used by the city.
Yeah, page 7 of my brief, if you want to see the breakdown, yeah. And basically what that is amongst the individual income streams, there is a summary where blended rates are put in place to value, to come up with the final value. The property has no semi-gross or gross leases in place.
It, let me just confirm that with regard to the daycare.
Sure.
Because I don't want to have the wrong information for you. I believe they are all. The daycare is not paying all of their recoveries.
Now, they don't list the management fees under the non-recoverables for this particular income statement. It shows up as admin.
That's correct. They're fully recoverable from all tenants aside from that.
The daycare.
Yeah, and the daycare, I think, is paying 70 cents a square foot towards management.
Okay. Is there a reason, and maybe it's just a lack of information from what I'm seeing,
Excuse me.
when you're looking at the front page of the statement and you're looking at the common area billings and you're looking at the management recovery, the line item is $42,000, $42,160.53, which is more than they show for the. Is there, what would be the reason for a discrepancy between the amount recovered and the amount that's billed for that particular item?
There's budgeting at the beginning of, or prior to the beginning of the year. A budget is put in place based on past performance of the property and the knowledge of the property management, and they budget a certain amount for tenants to be paying. So in some cases, it's slightly more than what it is, what the actual was, and then that is of course refunded to them in some manner through their payments.
Okay, no other questions.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I just want, I just want to confirm, because I think you said it, but I just want to confirm that I got it right. So there has been, since the previous cycle, there has been, I know there's potential for a supplemental in 2020, but there has been some other improvements to this property since the last cycle as well. Have they added another building since then as well?
Forgive me, I have to look at this briefly. I was looking at the, and I don't have my brief from the last cycle here, but I think a supplemental was added for a small portion of the site, yes. I'm not sure if you have that information in your file there.
I don't have it with me.
I'm pretty sure there was a slight addition.
There was something
Yeah.
else, yeah, okay. All right, that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Anderson? Mr. Smith, you are agreeing, I guess, with the cap rate for the code 40, and just one of the, the other larger property of 27,000 square feet. So the only one that the city is differed at is the Starbucks.
Correct.
did take the result from the previous assessment to the municipal board, and that's where it sits.
That's correct.
Summation, if you so desire.
Just that the property is likely to see a supplemental, and that we'll deal with the value again when that comes out, but that's likely to occur for the full 2020 roll year.
I thank you. Mr. Smith?
And just to that point, we'll obviously deal with the supplemental when it comes forward, but it's not in question today. We're happy to look at it when it happens.
Tracy, are you okay to move your car? You okay? No? Okay. So we'll go to the next one, which is a recommendation, is 1700 Corden Avenue.
Correct.
So we'll deal with that, and then we'll have a little break.
File number 19-539, applicant Stevenson Advisor, Stevenson Advisors LTD, roll number 1207-0324-000, address 1700 Corden Avenue, and the owner is Corden Village Mall LTD. The original assessment is for the roll year 2020 with the reference date of April 1st of 2018 at $8,072,000, class code 60 and fully taxable. The property is a neighborhood shopping center, 2 buildings, 34 premises on site, and number of stories range between 1 and 2 depending on the building. The actual year built also ranges, with one building being in 1969 and the other in 1989, and the effective ages are the same. The construction class is masonry bearing walls, and it's C2 commercial zoning. Land area 89,255 square feet. The plan area 38,948, and we have a total leasable area of $42,271. There is a recommendation. The recommendation for this particular property is based on the consolidation of 2 income streams into one. Previously, split to, oh no, I don't show it in my brief. There was previously an office income stream for this property. The primary use of the property is retail, and it's as a neighborhood shopping center. The income streams were consolidated, and that's part of why there is a reduction here in the value. The effect of that, the resulting effect is basically an overall higher cap rate and some slight changes to some of the rents under the NSC stream. If you flip to page 2, you'll see that the owner of the property has responded to all of our requests for information, so the property is compliant. There is no sales history for this particular property. The subject leases that are in place are shown at the bottom of page 2. They range from $11 all the way up to $20. Page 3, that's also leases of the subject property, and again, they fall all within that range, $11 to $20. Page 4, you'll see provided 2 sets of comparables. The set that you see on page 4 is basically a sample of main floor retail rents for the Corden area. There's a pretty large range in the rental rates that are in place along Corden. As low as $6.43, that's the low end, and then the high end, $32.03. The average here, $19.04 in the model relative to what we see in the market. If you flip to page 6, you'll see a range supported by the comparables that are provided there on page 4. The lowest it looks like is $11.47, as high as $20.09. So the workup that you see on page 6 and 7, that is the recommendation. So the changes have already been made in our system, and that's why you're getting this output with one income stream. The potential rent there for the 42,271 square feet of leasable area is $652,613. We've applied 4% vacancy, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, and shortfall at $8 a square foot. It's about $26,000 of an allowance given for non-recoverables. The net operating income there is $600,451. We've applied a cap rate of 7.80% for a capitalized rounded value at $7,698,000. And the summary of that is shown on page 8. If you flip to page 9, you'll see an aerial photo of the subject property. You can see that there's 2 buildings there. The more southern building is the one-story building, and the building with the marker on it is a 2-story building. And there's adequate parking there for the businesses. Corton's a very high traffic area, and I would consider this as an investment grade property. Map view shown at the bottom there. There's street view if you flip the page to page 10. Just to see the subject property as you'd see from the street. If you flip the page, see page 11. This was what was returned to us for the 2017 mailer. It actually ends on January 31st of 2018, so it's the year, the 12 months prior, leading up to that date. Again, they attach the full financials for the building. Again, here we can see recoveries, $50,000 for management fees. And if you flip the page to page 14, page 15, you can see that the management fees are recovered in full. And again, we would be suggesting that certain things be removed from this category when doing analysis of non-recoverable expenses. Leasing commissions, tenant improvements are things that we would remove, as well as the management as it's recovered. Page 16 and 17 is the rent roll as returned to us. That's our format for the rent roll. Then they also just provide their rent roll for the property. It's just shown for information purposes. Page 27, again, showing the range of cap rates. Page 28 is just some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and then I won't cover the addenda again. So that's my presentation for this particular property. I'm open for questions.
Mr. Smith, are you aware of the recommendation?
I am, and I appreciate it, but we're still slightly apart here, so, for good reasons.
Okay. Questions then?
Model driven. You made the change to combine the 2 income streams.
Yep, correct. It's still model driven, yeah.
Right. Those are all of my questions.
I thank you. Stevens?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Tracy?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Okay. Is this, I could ask Mr. Smith, is this property at the municipal board? You know, either party?
I'm not certain.
I don't
No,
think-
it's not.
I don't think so.
No.
Okay. So the floor is yours, Mr. Smith.
Okay. Just bear with me for half a minute
Yep.
here. I had to make an adjustment. Right. So 1700 Corridon. I'm just going to make a slight adjustment to my final market value. It comes out to $7,358,000.
You going up?
I am going up. There was a vacancy that should have been adjusted, but let's see.
7,358,358.
358.
Thank you. All right.
So, subject property, 1700 Corridon, originally built in 1969, with the additional building, which is the office building, added in 1989. It's a retail mall, essentially, not a standard strip, as it has interior units with interior circulation space, like a traditional regional mall. Not that it's a regional mall, but if you look at the photos, I can show you what I mean when we get there. The build out of the units varies significantly from unit to unit. And again, let's just look at the photos to provide that background. So you've got some exteriors on page number 4 from the street. Then we move into the retail portion of the building on page number 5, and you can see the significant interior circulation space that I'm referring to. So obviously there's costs that go along with that additional space, circulation, etc. It's also not a modern layout or not a modern build out. Certainly this type of property is generally restricted now to your regional malls, where you have much larger stores off of the central corridors. This was kind of a unique construction, I guess. Many of the malls that were like this have been demalled, such as the one in Fort Richmond, and I believe there's another one on North Henderson that I can recall, where they've changed the configuration of the malls to reflect modern retail layouts for tenancies.
That interior circulation, is that on the south building only?
It would be on the east building only, yes.
Oh,
on
it's
back
the
of
east
site.
building only.
Yeah, at the back of the site.
The back, oh,
The
is
one
that so?
that's closest to Corridon is the office building.
So the big square one here.
The big square one is the Royal Bank building.
Oh,
which is
this,
the
okay,
office.
so this is where the, okay, got it, thank you, okay.
The older part of the site, 1969. So a few further photos, site layout on page 7. You can get the layout better there with the bank building fronting on Corridon and the other building at the back. So it's a full U-shaped corridor that runs through it with 2 entry exits accessing that site. So, moving on to valuation, we provide the actual leases in place on page number 11, and provide the net rents for those. In one case, there was a gross rent for a very small space, so we brought that back to what the net would be for that by deducting the appropriate operating costs. There is a vacancy in the property as shown. Unit number 207 was vacant from August 2016 going forward. We then compare this to the market on page number 12 with our rental comparables. We try and look at similarly located, similar size, similar age, if at all possible, and similar use, attractiveness to tenants certainly. So if you look at the sale comparables there's a number of them that are on Corridon, certainly many in the area, Academy, Roblin, Corridon, etc. And generally, they frame the fact that the in-place rental rates are appropriate for the subject property. We also provide some office space lease comparables on page number 13 and 14 in reference to the office property as well. The bank does not have the whole building. There's a significant number of smaller office tenancies in that particular property. In reviewing the material, it looks like the in-place rental rates are supported by the market. So we believe that the rental stream that the property produces is appropriate and should be relied upon in doing the valuation. Again, if you buy the property at the valuation date, you get the in-place rental income, not a higher revenue. We include signage, parking, and storage income in our valuation as well. So the calculation of the revenue streams is shown on page number 15 for the retail as well as the office portions. We apply an overall 4% vacancy rate for the subject property. That was the adjustment that I had to make in my model, or rather in my market valuation, and I'll show you that when we come to it. Again, we're asking for the reinstitution of the 5% non-recoverable portion of the expense allowance, as well as the 2% structural non-recoverable portion of the expense allowance, for a total of 7%. We use the same shortfall as the city, and we can move on to capitalization rate on page number 19. We're looking at the cap rate study at the top. Again, we have the same retail cap rate study. Property at Osborne and Stradbrook, purchased in 2018. The cap rate of 7.5% on a $4.2 million asset acquisition. 7.1% on a property on Gateway, also in 2018, $925,000 in value. The subject property itself, well located, the retail portion of the property is certainly not ideal in today's day and age for retail tenancies. You do not tend to get national tenants going in there. This, of course, will affect rental rates and vacancy over time as well, as your smaller retail tenants tend to not have the same wherewithal and will tend to have greater vacancy over time. The layout with the interior court, interior circulation is certainly odd and would have an impact on what somebody would pay for an asset such as this. Balancing that, it is on court and in the River Heights area. So we've applied a cap rate of 7.8% to the subject property. With regard to the office building, I did not mention that. While it has a bank tenancy, it also has significant second floor office space, again, with smaller tenancies by and large. So looking at our final market valuation on page number 20, we had broken it out as the city had originally, although we've applied a single cap rate. So the initial income stream at the top at 7.8% comes to $3,713,000. Changing the vacancy in the bottom chart from 5.5% to 4%, as was originally intended, changes the vacancy allowance to $13,042. The effective gross income to $312,999. The expense allowance to $21,910. And our NOI comes down to $284,341. Capping that at 7.8% gives us $3,645,000. Combined, the $3,645,000 plus the $3,713,000, we come to a total value of $7,358,000. And our addenda remains the same with the inclusion of the income and expense for the property as well as rental. Thank you.
I thank you. Questions of the applicant?
I do, yeah. Can you repeat the NOI that you used there?
Sure. So for the bottom chart, as I was following the original valuation, The final NOI is $284,341.
And so we would be looking at combined between the retail component and the office component and NOI. Do you have that figure?
I just recalculated, so just give me a moment. 341. $573,966 is what we come to versus the $600,451 that the city has.
Correct. Okay.
I believe the vacancy, if you look at the combined vacancy, it virtually matches what the vacancy for the property was for that time frame.
Correct. So just on the income statement again, under the non-recoverables, the management is fully recovered, correct? Do you know why it appears under the non-recoverables? In some instances it does, sometimes it doesn't. Is there a reason for that?
So we're looking at management fee.
Yeah, just, I don't have a numbered page, but it's following the mailer in your appendix 3. They show the 12 months ending January 31st, 2018. And they show recovery for management, but then they list management as a non-recoverable. I just want to try to get a sense of why it would be.
So this isn't something that I identified before I come in, so let me just have a
Sure.
look at it here. So you've got your recoveries at the top. I am not 100% certain. If we look at the rent roll, might give us a bit more detail. With regard to the recoveries, it does look like recoveries are paid by the majority of the tenants for management fee. And again, that's not a dispute. We don't dispute that management fee is recoverable. It's always generally written into net leases as a recoverable item.
Yeah, I understand. Just mostly, I just didn't understand why.
I couldn't tell you why they accounted for it in that manner, but
Gotcha.
we don't deal with it in that same way.
Okay. And if we were to use the municipal board's indication of what should not be included, and we were to remove the leasing commissions and the tenant improvements and the management fees that are recovered, it appears that under that non-recoverable category, there's approximately just over $22,000 in non-recoverable items, as per what the municipal board has suggested should be included, correct?
Well, I'll answer your question.
Yeah, sure.
So 2 points. This is a single year that we're looking at, and obviously we should be looking at the longer time horizon in order to establish a fair assessment of those expenses, which is what we, both the city and ourselves and other appellants have done in looking at these expenses. With regard to what should and shouldn't be included, we are certainly on different sides of that, and I prefer to rely on the accepted practice of the Appraisal Institute of Canada and their extensive teaching that they provide to the appraisal profession within Canada, as well as to the assessment profession as well. I believe many of the courses are taught to assessors as well.
No other questions, thank you.
Well, thank you. Ms. Stevens?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I am also good.
Mr. Smith, just an observation. I think you said in total your NOI is 573,966, correct?
I believe that's what it was.
Okay. So, okay, that's, that's all I have to say. Submission, if you so desire.
The only thing that I would say is I think that the recommendation is fair and equitable for the market value as of the reference date.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I have no summation.
Okay, we're going to take about a 5 or 10-minute break.
But
All right.
Has to work a lot of lousy hours, I'm afraid.
We'll call the meeting back
Oh,
to
she-
order,
she- At Jolly.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's good.
and we'll go to the next property, which is Island Shore Boulevard, number 14, whenever you're ready.
File number 19-1503, applicant is Stevenson Advisors LTD. The roll number 0600-291-2000. The address is 14 Island Shore Boulevard. The owner is FCR Holdings Incorporated. There's a split class of liability here. So there's a taxable portion tagged as class code 60 for roll year 2020 with the reference date of April 1st of 2018, $6,559,000. And then we have an institutional property, class code 40 exempt at $1.103 million, where total assessed value $7,662,000. I do actually have a recommendation for the value of this property, and that's the workup that you'll see later in the brief. It's a slight reduction, but
I would imagine it's not accepted, correct?
I haven't entirely looked at it yet.
Okay, okay.
you can see the recommendation on, I guess if you look at page 6, it will have the full summary, but the revised figure is $7,577,000, so not a huge
Yeah.
difference, but basically.
Sorry, could you say that number again? 7,000,000?
$7,577,000.
77.
Yeah, shown on page 6. So basically, the workup in here is the recommendation. I just forgot to include my little blurb at the front. But basically, what we did here was there was a investors group that was occupying one of the 3 buildings that are on site, and they've since vacated the property. There no longer is a heavy office use there, so it is primarily retail space. So what we did was we consolidated the income streams back into one. We show 12 premises on site, land area, actual year built ranges from 1987 to 2008. The effective age that we've applied, 1997 to 2008. Wood or steel framed exterior walls, C3 commercial zoning, land area 101,098 square feet, plan area 32,635 square feet. The leasable area that we have on file is 31,736 square feet. Page 2, you can see that the subject property has responded to all of our requests for information, so they are compliant with the Act. And there was a sale for the property a long time ago in May of 2001 for $1.2 million, so not a lot of weight was put on the sale. The subject property leases are shown at the bottom of page 2, and they range from $14 upwards to $27.91. Should be noted that the investors group lease that's shown there in the subject properties they've vacated, so that's no longer in place there. Page 3, you'll see the rental comparables that I've used. Again, there's a range here, $7.33 upwards to $26, I believe is the high end of the range. The average there is $19.32. If you flip to page 4, you can see that for the exempt portion of the building, there's 4,200 square feet of leasable area. The model applies a rate of $17.93 a square foot. Potential rent there, $75,306. 4% vacancy is given for an effective gross income $72,294. Non-recoverable expense allowance at 2% and shortfall at $8 per square foot for a net operating income of $69,504 with a 7.3 cap rate applied. The capitalized value rounded is at $952,000, and that's for the class code 40 exempt portion of the building. Page 5, you'll see the remainder of the property. Again, it's classified as a neighborhood shopping center, class code 60 and taxable. And the remainder of the leasable area, 27,536 square feet. And the model applied rents ranging from $17.47 upwards of $32.72. 4% vacancy is applied, 2% non-recoverable expense allowance and shortfall at $8 a square foot. The net operating income is $483,654, and the cap rate is 7.3%. Capitalized and rounded value is $6.625 million, so $6,625,000. Page 6, you'll just see a summary of the income valuation. The total net operating income that we arrive at is $553,158. Cap rate is 7.3 for the overall property, and the revised value, which is my recommendation, at $7,577,000. Page 7, you can see some photos of the property. The building that is closest to Bishop Grandin in the first photo is the building that was previously occupied by the investors group, and they've since vacated. The space has been reclaimed, I believe, with some retail premises, and that was kind of the justification for the removal of the office income stream that was previously on file for this property. Page 8, you can see some street view photos of the subject property, just showing that there are 3 separate buildings and there's a large parking area in between. Page 9, you see the income and expense mailer, and page 11, you can see the financial statement that was attached. Again, you can see that the management is fully recovered. And it is again listed under the non-recoverable expenses. So again, I'm not sure why it would be shown like that, but it is a recovered thing. In this instance, there is an asset manager's fee, $32,000 and $32,832. That is something that the appraisal textbook would have you remove when you're doing your analysis of non-recoverables. And then we've attached the rent roll here for information purposes. The cap rate table again just shows that we're within the range that we find between our 20th and 80th percentile for neighborhood shopping centers. So the range is 7.15 to 7.3, and we're at 7.3. And if you look to CBRE's rates for neighborhood shopping centers, they indicate 6.5 to 7% for the cap rate. Again, at page 20, there's some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. I won't cover any of that, and I won't cover the addenda again. That's all for my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Just like to acknowledge, and thank the city for noticing that the office portion is no longer there and making that adjustment. That's great to see. The, just a note on management, again, we're not at odds with regard to property management recovery, correct? We're not allowing, this is not impacting either of our valuations, correct? How their accounting is done and presented in the materials at the back of the brief?
Correct, yeah. The only purpose of pointing it out is to show that if you're removing the management from what's included in the non-recoverable on the financial statement, is that the allowance that's given with the 2% and the vacancy shortfall, like in this instance, the management's fully recovered and we wouldn't include asset management. So what you're left with is maybe $5,000 in non-recovered items, and the allowance that we give is much larger than that. So it's just to illustrate that what is applied at 2% is reasonable when you look at the actuals and you make the appropriate adjustments for those particular line items that the municipal board is saying that's not included.
So that's a one-year snapshot, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So going, and just as we're talking about this, looking at it theoretically, we've got 10,000 square feet that are now vacant, have to be demised, correct?
Correct,
So
yeah.
that would be a landlord cost. They'd have to put in new rooftop units for each of those tenancies, correct? Landlord cost.
Potentially, yeah.
Leasing commissions to put tenants into those spaces, tenant improvements, all of these things would come up in the next year, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
prior years. So the 1 year is not necessarily a good indicator of whether that fee is appropriate or not, is it?
I mean, if you're doing a full analysis, you should stabilize, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
If we all had endless amounts of time and
Correct.
data, yeah, okay. Those are all my questions, thank you.
Ms. Stevens,
I think I'm good, thank you.
Tracy?
I am also good, thank you.
Can you tell me from the last go round, assessment wise, what the average increase for these type of properties? Average.
I couldn't give you an exact figure that I would wanna,
Mhm.
yeah. We looked at some preliminary numbers when we were doing our percent change analysis between cycles. I'm fairly certain, and again, don't hold me to it, but I'm fairly certain that the average increase was over 20% for retail, across the retail portfolio. But again, I don't know what the finalized figures were, so it's hard for me
Do you
to
know,
put
Mr.
a
Smith,
number to it.
offhand?
We don't have a study of that nature showing what an average increase would be. We don't have information on every property in the city.
Okay. All right. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So 14 Island Shore. Let's get right into it. Our photos start on page number 4. You can see it's 1987 vintage with the build out on the exterior on pages 4 and 5. I'm not sure why the interior photos were not included. As mentioned, Investors Group was the sole tenant of one of the 3 buildings on site. If you look at page number 8, you can see the overall site layout. Island Shore is right off of Bishop Grandin in that St. Patel Southdale rather area. The location is shown on page number 9. So it's between St. Anne's and Lagimoje in that Island Lakes area, just off of Bishop Grandin. So its location there is pretty specific to the area it's in. There's no direct access to the site off of Bishop Grandin, as it's traffic-controlled thoroughfare. You're not allowed to access directly to the site. And the proximity of some larger centers mean that this really is a neighborhood-oriented asset in that Island Lakes area itself. Moving on to the valuation on page number 12, we provide the rent roll, the leases in place. You can see they range between that $13.29 value up to a very small lease of 430 square feet of just under $28 a square foot. The thing to note here, as mentioned already, is the investors group issue. They were in 10,383 square feet at $22 a square foot. They were a pure office tenancy. They provided notice prior to the end of their lease at May 31, 2018, well in advance of that, that they would be exiting the property. And so they had 10,000 square feet coming vacant, 10,383 coming vacant at that time. There's not a lot of office tenants of that size in our market looking for a location such as this. So the obvious answer was to change the asset and turn it into 4 retail units, which is what has been done, 4 equal size units. The first tenancy occurred in 2019, and I realize this is post-reference, but it's somewhat informative, so just to give you a background on how I approached it. They were in at a rate of $18.90 a square foot with a period of free rent. We looked at this and the property itself and the market, and we felt that $18 a square foot would be an appropriate rental rate. So that's what we've applied to that vacant space of 10,383 square feet in our valuation. If you apply that rental rate, it gives you a final potential rent of $510,077. We compare this to the market on page number 13. With regard to the $18 rate, which is probably the one that would be of interest. If you go to the bottom of the chart, you can see a number of our leases in that 2017-18 timeframe. 2539 Main is a relatively recently built property, 1991, rent in there from 2017 at $18 a square foot. 1994 property on Henderson at $18 in 2017. The Britannica property is well located in South St. Paul, just on the corner of St. Mary's, $18 a square foot for 800 square feet. That property has been renovated as well, so it was built in '86, but it has been refaced and refinished since that time. And finally, 1520 Regent, very well located, 2017 lease at $19 a square foot. So we believe the $18 a square foot, supported by the rent that they got post-reference, as well as what the market is saying, is appropriate. So that's what we've applied. We've used 2 vacancy rates. We've applied 5% to the majority of the property. However, looking at the 10,383 square foot property, obviously there's going to be a period of lease up that should be accounted for. So simply for that section of the property itself, we've applied a 10% vacancy allowance. As noted, the first tenant didn't go in until well into 2019, and the others remained vacant at that time. Our expense allowance comments remain the same, and we have used the shortfall allowance as it was appropriate for the property as well. The NOIs are summarized on page 17, but the entire thing is summarized on page 19. So let's flip to page 18, capitalization rate. Again, we've used a single cap rate for the entire property, as that's how it would be viewed in the marketplace by investors. Our cap rate chart is shown on page number 18 rather, with a range of between 7.1% and dominantly 7.6% for the most part, with one on the higher end of the scale. These were all investment sales. Subject property, while neighborhood oriented, it is well tenanted, et cetera. So we felt that a cap rate of 7.5% would be applicable. It doesn't have the same draw as a property that would be on, say, a Lagimoje or a St. Mary's, et cetera, which does have an impact on investor sentiment in acquiring an asset such as this. So using the cap rate of 7.5% across the board, I've broken out the property as it was originally done by the city prior to the combination. So you can see the breakout on page 9 there by class category. So if you combine the two retails, it comes to $5,033,000, with the class 40 component coming to $635,000. And our addenda remains the same, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Questions of the applicant?
Just one in regards to the cap rate. Is there a reason 7.5 was utilized as opposed to, like, there's a range there, right? Is one of those cap rates sales most appropriate to put weight on? Is that how the 7.5 was arrived at, or?
No, it's not relying on a single sale over others. It's looking at the market as it is, so looking at the range. Essentially, we're framing what an appropriate cap rate would be for the subject properties as we look at them. So these are again recent retail investment sales. So a property at Osborne and Stradbrook, certainly well located, trading in 2018 at a 7.5% cap, with some upside. 7.1, 7.4, it's the Osborne property in 2016, just under $2 million. Again, we're dealing with significant properties here, so.
And you agree that the model cap rate at 7.3 falls within the range that we see here?
Indeed, yes.
Okay. Okay. No other questions?
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
No, so at the assessment date, sorry, I think you did give the date, but at the assessment date, that one piece of the property was vacant, correct?
No.
Oh, it was right almost immediately after?
May 31st.
Okay.
And they gave their notice a year in advance of that.
Okay.
That they were vacating, so it was a known fact that they were gone.
And that investor space, what used to be the investor space, that's all one story as well, correct?
It is.
It is, okay. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mr. Smith, you've gone to the 7.5% cap rate.
I have this. You're looking for further explanation?
No,
No?
no, I'm happy with that.
I don't feel that this property off of Bishop Grandin as a really locally oriented property would derive a lower cap rate than a property at Osborne and Stradbrook that's well tenanted with upside.
All right. Summation, either party?
No, thank you. No submission.
Okay. So we'll go to further down the street, either way, 1436 Gordon Avenue.
We skip
Oh.
2020?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. 2020 Corden.
Okay, file number 19-1934, applicant is Stevenson Advisors LTD. Roll number 1000-326-8100. The address is 2020 Corden Avenue. The owner is 3375811 Canada Incorporated. The roll year in question is the 2020, with a reference date of April 1st, 2018. The assessed value is $3.730,000. Class code 60 and taxable. It's a neighborhood shopping center of 2 buildings and 8 premises. Both buildings are 1-story built. No, incorrect. There is a 2nd story for the building closest to Corden, and the building to the rear of the property furthest from Corden is a 1-story building. Actual age here, 1989, with an effective age of 1989. Construction class, masonry bearing walls, and C2 commercial zoning. Land area, 55,493 square feet. Plan area of 14,639 square feet. The total leasable area that we have in place is 16,449 square feet. Flip to page 2, you'll see that the subject property has responded to all of the city's requests for information, so they're compliant with the act. No subject sale history. There is 5 of the subject property leases, and they range between $15 and $20. The most recent being October 11, 2017, $20 square foot. If you flip to page 3, you'll see that I've included rent comparables. Again, this is a sample of retail space all along Corden. And there's a range in the rents that are in place for that type of space. An outlier, but at the bottom end of the range, I would say, is the 643 at 1675 Corden, but upwards to $32 at 1685 Corden. And the average that we see for the rent comparables, $18.49. Flip to page 4, you'll see the model applied rates for the space here at the subject property. Total leasable area here is 16,449 square feet, with the modeled applied rents ranging from $13.61 upwards to $21.95. The potential rent for this property is $295,044. 4% vacancy allowance is given to arrive at an effective gross income of $283,242. 2% non-recoverable expense allowance, and shortfall at $8 a square foot. The net operating income here is $272,313. The cap rate is 7.3%. You arrive at a capitalized value rounded at $3.730,000. Page 5 is just a summary of that. Page 6, you have some aerial photos and a map view of the subject property, just showing again that there are 2 buildings there and that there is a parking area that services both buildings on site. Page 7, you'll see some street view photos of the subject property, showing that there is also some parking to the rear of the property, the back lane. Page 9, 8 and 9 is that's the mailer for 2017, the income expense questionnaire. That attached, we have the income statement for the property. Again, just to point out, the management's fully recovered. Leasing commissions here are pretty sizable, $30,000, just over $30,000. And again, we would be suggesting that you don't include that in the analysis for looking at the non-recoverable expenses for this property. And again, with management being fully recovered, you're looking at what our opinion is non-recoverables totaling $1,305. And if you look at page 5 of our brief, you'll see that with the 2%, it's an allowance of $5,665, and then if you factor in the shortfall, it's an additional allowance of another $5,264. So again, making those appropriate removals of specific items has been updated to us by the municipal board. The allowance that's given there is greater than what's shown on the income statement for this particular property. Page 17 is again just cap rate information, again showing that the neighborhood shopping center cap rate ranges from our 20th percentile at 7.15 to 80th percentile at 7.3. And again, CBRE has it at 6.5 to 7%. And again, I think the comment was made that these are investment properties that they look at, and I would consider this property an investment grade property. Page 18, some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act, and then the addenda. And I won't cover that stuff again as we've gone over it prior in the hearing. That's everything for this particular brief. I'm open for questions.
I thank you, sir. Mr. Smith?
Yes, so for this the subject property, there's an office component and a retail component, but they're combined into
One stream, correct?
one stream,
Yeah.
correct?
Correct.
Okay. You had mentioned the non-recoverable operating expenses again, so page number 11
Yep.
of your brief. This is a one-year history, correct?
Correct.
So we're looking at one snapshot in time, not 3 years, not 5 years.
Correct.
What's coming up. You have indicated that you would remove, or the city rather would remove $30,000 of that non-recoverable expense from the leasing commissions, correct?
30,000 for the leasing commissions, but
So-
also the management as well.
Well, yes, the
Yeah.
management is not in question
Right.
at
Yeah.
all. We both agree on that aspect. And again, it's terminology that is that issue on the management. Looking at the non-recoverable operating expenses, so there's, if you go down the list there as well, there is obviously mortgage payment and interest, which are not included. Then we have a small tenant improvement and $46,000 of building improvements. That would be included as a non-recoverable operating expense, would it not? Under the city's model, that would be included in what should be allowed under the city's modeling, essentially. So
I'm not certain if it's capital expenditure.
It's
I
not
don't
a-
know if it would be included.
it's not a capital expenditure. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Cynthia?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Tracy?
Oh, good, thanks.
I have no questions. Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So 2020 Corridor. If you look at my page number 3, you can see the appeal history of the subject property going back to 2014. I believe that 2014 appeal has been resolved. I probably just didn't have the figure to include that it was reduced to, but you can see reductions in 16 and 18 as well. 2018 being reduced to $2,821,000. We're now asking our valuation rather for the reference time period is $3,126,000. You can see the logical progression in value here that we're looking at. If you look at the jump from the $2,821,000 to $3,730,000, it's just under $1 million. and represents 32.3% increase. This is well beyond what we would see as the norm in the marketplace and is not indicative of fair market value for the subject. Moving into the valuation, or rather the photos, you can see the photos beginning on page number 4, some interior shots as well. The last one, number 6, is a haircut place. I thought it was hairdo, not hairdo zoo. There was a kids exercise and play place that is no longer there, but this is actually the haircut place on page 6. The site is shown on page number 7. The bank office building is located closest to Corridon there, and the other building is located at the back of the site. Location is shown on page number 8, and in my presentation, as I forgot to ask this question when I had the opportunity, I would point out that 2025 Corridon, as part of the city's information, is Tuxedo Park Shopping Center. That's the whole bottom portion of the rental comparables on page number 3 of their brief. Tuxedo Park Shopping Center, while across the road, the grocery anchored shopping center, also with Shoppers, also with liquor and Manitoba Liquor Commission, all national tenancies, etc. Not comparable to the subject. The valuation itself, let's jump into that. Page number 11, the actual leases in place are shown on page number 11 on the chart. You can see that we have a net rent range from $14 up to $20, with most of them in that $14, $15, $15.50, $16.50, and the bank being at $18 net for their space, with one tenancy at $20 a square foot. In fact, that tenant has vacated since that time frame and is no longer in place, but that is post-reference material. The comparables for the subject property began on page 12. Go through these, you can see they're typically very well located properties on major thoroughfares. So we have Pembina Highway, we have Academy, we have Corridon itself, obviously, new property on Main Street, properties further down on Roblin, etc. These are all well-located, well-tenanted properties, certainly representative of the subject. And our rental rate range here goes from the low end of $12 a square foot up to $19 a square foot for these tenancies. Happy to talk about any individual one if you want, but it does essentially show you that the rents in place are indicative of market. I did provide some office rents as well for that aspect. In any case, we believe that the rents in place are indicative of market, and we are using them in our valuation. I have to stress, if you buy this property, you don't get a different income stream. You get the income stream that's in place. It's legally binding for the tenancies that are there. It carries forward. You do not get additional income that is projected. The rents are what the rents are, and indeed they're borne out by the marketplace. The vacancy allowance for the subject property, we've applied a 5% vacancy for the property as a whole. We provide the stats on page 14. Our expense allowance is shown on page 14 and 15 as well. We ask the same as we did for all properties today. The shortfall allowance is appropriate for the market, and we've used that as well in our value. Looking at page number 16 is informative, I think. If you look at the top line, the potential rental income, the city is projecting $295,000 in rent. The actual net rent, 100% occupied, is $267,839. So we've got a delta there of just under $30,000. Very significant gap in revenue that an investor would not get if they bought this at the valuation date. We've included the signage income, which brings it up a little bit, applied the 5% vacancy, 7% overall expense allowance, as well as the shortfall, and we come to a net income of $234,485. We have capped our net operating income at 7.5%. Again, our cap rate study is shown on page number 17. 7.5% is certainly an appropriate cap for a property such as this. And we come to a final market value of $3,126,000. You can see our valuation on page number 18 in comparison to the city. Again, I point out in particular the initial gap in revenue that the city has projected that an investor would not get if they were to purchase this property at that time frame. And that is my presentation. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
I have no questions.
Ms. Stevens?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
Also good, thank you.
I noticed that, I'm not sure whether the city had sign income.
I don't believe that it's in the city's model.
So I noticed that you had stressed about the difference between the grosses, so that's that part.
And you'll have to confirm this with the city, but I think that the projection, the potential rent income that the city model is inclusive of all revenue sources. So whether, on apartment, that would include parking, etc. On retail, I imagine that includes the full gamut of revenue sources as well. But you'd have to confirm that with the city.
I don't believe that the sign revenue is something that is included into the modeled rents for each premise.
Okay.
Not individually, but on an overall basis. The potential rent, there's not extra rents that are applied, correct?
Yeah, like if you look on our brief, page 4, there is a section where other income would come into play. In this instance, there's no adjustment for other income.
Yeah. Summation, either party?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Bear with me for a second here. Okay, we'll go to 1436 Gordon. Whenever you're ready.
File number 19-564, applicant is Stevenson Advisors LTD. Roll number 120506900000. Address is 1436 Gordon Avenue. The owner is Interstruct Limited. Rule year under appeal 2020 with a reference date of April 1st of 2018. The assessed value under appeal is $936,000. Class code 60 and taxable. The property is tagged as a neighborhood shopping center. However, the income stream, we've relied classifying the space as retail space, so it's a distinction is made between the classification, the parcel usage as neighborhood shopping center, and the valuation for when we're driving our rents and our cap rate. One building, 4 premises, 1 story, built in 1951, with an effective age of 1951. Wood or steel frame construction, C1 zoning, right along Gordon. Land area, 10,879 square feet. Plan area, 5,996 square feet, which is also the gross floor area. Total leasable area that we have in place, 5,804 square feet. If you flip to page 2 of the brief, you can see that the subject property has responded to both of our requests for information, and they are compliant with the Act. No subject sale history, and at the bottom of page 2, you can see 4 leases that are in place at the subject property as of the reference date. The range there is between $13.50 and $15. If you flip to page 3, you can see that again, I've provided rental comparables all along Gordon. And again, they range from as low as $6.43 upwards to $32.03. Obviously, I would consider those 2 particular comparables as outliers when you're looking at the overall data set. The average that we have is $19.07. If you flip to page 4, you'll see the model applied rates. Leasable area, again, 5,804 square feet, and the rent per square foot applied to the 4 premises ranges from $14.80 upwards of $15.37. So again, considering the rental comparables, the average $19, and looking at the range for within the table of comparables of properties that are similar in location and type of property. The only thing I would say here is the age of this property is a bit older, and as such, that is kind of reflected in the rents. So again, we're on the lower side of the average when you're looking at the model applied rents between $14 and $15. But the potential rent there is $87,783. 6% vacancy is applied for an effective gross income of $82,516. Non-recoverable expense allowance at 2%, and shortfall at $650 a square foot for a net operating income of $78,602. The cap rate here is a retail cap rate. So again, we've opted not to use the neighborhood shopping center parameter for this particular building, even though it's tagged in our system as neighborhood shopping center. But the cap rate used is 8.4 for a capitalized and rounded value at $936,000. Page 5 is just a summary of that. Page 6, you'll see some photos of the subject property. Again, the property is located directly on Corden, at the corner of Corden and Waterloo. There is some parking to the side and rear of the subject property, and if you flip to page 6, you can see the street view of the front of the building and the side, as well. If you flip to page 8, you can see the parking area on the side of the building and to the rear of the building. Page 9 is the income and expense mailer as submitted by the owner, again with the statement attached. In this particular instance, again, management is recovered and leasing commissions is $16,000. We would remove that. So under this category, for the purposes of our analysis, we would look at $62.20 of non-recoverables. And again, the allowance is much higher than that. Again, it is a snapshot of 1 year. It's not stabilized, but that is the process that we go through in the addenda of our report. It is all stabilized and stuff. When we arrived at our 2%, that was the process that was used. So again, for information purposes, the rent roll and stuff is attached. The cap rates shown here don't show the range that we would see for the retail parameters that are applied for this particular property. But again, a similar range is found. We don't have it on our table here, but you would see at the 20th percentile, low end of the range, and at the 80th percentile, high end of the range, and typically you'd find a cap rate in the middle of that. I won't cover the assessments, the Municipal Assessment Act, and I will not cover the addenda as we've gone through that stuff already. That is my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
So I don't want to belabor the point, but it's been brought up again. So let's look at the non-recoverable expenses on page number 12. You are indicating that you would deduct $16,253 in leasing commissions from non-recoverable operating expenses in the city's analysis, correct?
Correct, as per the municipal forecast.
Would that be a normal cost that a property owner would incur in any normal investment property? Would they be as successful doing the leasing themselves?
I wouldn't want to speculate on their individual
Okay, so
savviness, but yeah, it's common that they use leasing.
It's normal practice, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is it at all likely that a tenant would be paying the leasing commissions for the property owner for themselves to go into the space?
Typically
Or indeed-
not, no.
Or indeed other tenants?
Typically not.
Okay. Those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
No, thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
No, thank you.
Okay. I don't think I have either, other than, no, Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So 1436 Corridon Avenue, probably all either been there or driven past it. It has the Greek market in it, excellent Greek food if you're ever looking for takeout. Also a number of other tenancies there. Let's expedite this. The site is located on Corridon. If you want to see where, it's shown on page number 8. And we can move into the valuation itself. The actual leases in place are shown on page number 11. They are dominantly struck in 2016 and 2017, as shown on the chart at the top of the page, with one from 2014 running through 2019. The rental rate range is from $13.50 to $15 a square foot for those spaces. The property was originally built in 1951. As you can see, it's street front retail. It's not a neighborhood shopping center or anything of that nature. There may be some parking there, but dominantly it's street front retail. So you pull up and go in. The retail comparables are shown on page number 11 and 12. Very well supported by the market as far as the rents that are in place. Beyond that, the rents are struck in 16 and 17. They're very close to the reference date. If you buy this property, this is the income stream that you get. You don't get additional income that is projected for the property. So to rely on that is simply inaccurate. Looking at the remainder of valuation, our statements regarding vacancy and expense allowance are shown on page numbers 13 and 14. We utilize 5% vacancy rate in our allowance, as well as the 5% non-recoverable expense allowance, 2% structural allowance, for a total of 7% non-recoverable expense allowance, in addition to the shortfall as is accepted appraisal practice, as well as assessment. The shortfall allowance itself, property is shown at the bottom of page number 14. Given the amount of restaurant space in this building, which is 78% of the overall space, they obviously have higher than normal operating expenses, as operating restaurants uses additional utilities beyond the norm of a normal retail tenancy. So it's skewed to the high side with restaurant space. Operating expenses were $13.03 a square foot for 2017. This is consistent with the past. We've used a shortfall rate of $10 a square foot. It's not a huge difference, but it is reflective of the property. The net operating operating incomes are summarized on page number 15 in relation to this. Our vacancy rate is lower than the city at 5%. Obviously, the rent is lower, and the shortfall is ever so slightly higher at $10 a square foot because of the nature of the property. Capitalization rate, we are in agreement with a cap rate, or rather, we're not. My apologies, the city is at 8.4%. We're using a cap rate of 8.25% for the subject property. If you look at street front retail versus neighborhood or community shopping center where you can pull in, park your car, walk in, etc., the convenience is a significant aspect. The profile as well. Property was built in 1951. We've applied 8.25% in our valuation. Gives us a final market value of $841,000. And I'm open for questions.
I thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Just one question. Page 14, they show two sections on shortfall. Is this an error that it shows that they're deferring, we will defer to city shortfall rates for the purpose of this valuation? That's just a doubling up of the,
That should have been deleted, yes.
okay, yeah. I just wanted to be clear on that. Yeah. And yeah, you're lower than us on cap. Seems the major difference there is the NOI, correct?
Yes, the top line rent and then the NOI, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, no other questions.
Thank you. Stevens?
I think I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Anderson?
I do actually have a question, and it's
What?
for my own knowledge. Okay, so this, in the shortfall allowance section, you've made a higher cost per square foot based on the fact that it's 78% restaurant.
Right.
The other major tenant there is a hairdressing salon, and I would warrant that they probably use the same amount of utilities and water, et cetera, as a restaurant. Does that come into play or not?
It, our knowledge internally at Cushman Wakefield Stevenson is that restaurant tenancies tend to have higher utility use. I know that a salon would, have hair dryers, et cetera. But, and obviously washing hair, but overall, the utility use is higher for restaurants than the majority of retail tenants, I would think, including salons, with dishwashers, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, and operating the ranges and all the electricity, it's higher
Okay,
than the norm.
fair enough. I just was wondering how
Oh, yeah.
how you calculate that shortfall rate based on the increased amount of the utilities. I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, typically you'll find it would be, closer in range to what the city is suggesting as the shortfall rate, but because of the actual tenancies and the operation of the building, it's higher at the $13, so we've made it 10 rather than 7, that's all.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, you're a little lower than for the cap rate for your particular subject property?
I am, yes.
Okay. So where did you get your cap from?
Well, again, we're looking at our cap rate chart on page 15. These are larger, more
Yeah.
larger neighborhood
But
shopping centers for the
they're
most
all
part.
pointing before, prior to, it was like 7.5.
Mhm.
So now we're up to 8.25.
Right, so a couple things go into that. We're
Okay.
looking at street front retail versus neighborhood or area shopping center where you can, where there's parking available, the visibility is great, the tenancy tends to be better. Built in 1951, lower ceiling height, it's just less attractive overall.
So wouldn't you look at maybe a different sort of capital study? Or because of,
With regard to the cap rate.
yes, yeah.
Uh,
To be, because it is, like you say, it's a different property.
It is a different property, and, yes,
So-
you're right. Perhaps I should look at including a few others of when the property varies like that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I know, it's always a question of time, so, but, you're using the same cap study here for, this particular property.
I don't think that's necessarily going to be a lot different with most appellants, but
Yeah,
if you,
yeah.
The point of the cap study is to place the subject in relation to the market. So if you look at what's provided there, it would be inferior to those. So the 8 1/4 would be appropriate in my opinion.
Okay. Summary,
I got nothing.
summation?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go to Henderson Highway, 1873 Henderson, whenever you're ready.
Correct. File number 19-4905. The applicant is Stevenson Advisors Limited. The roll number is 0400-725-7005. The address is 1873 Henderson Highway, and the owner is 1873 Henderson Incorporated. The roll year in question, 2020, with the reference date of April 1st, 2018, and assessed value $2,123,000. Class code 60, taxable for this particular property. It's again tagged as a neighborhood shopping center. We show 3 buildings and 2 premises, 1-story buildings. The actual year built ranges from 1987 to 1998, and the effective ages applied range from 1990 to 1995. Masonry bearing walls, C2 zoning, land area 48,627 square feet. The plan area 11,361 square feet, which is also the gross floor area. Total leasable area that we have on file 11,300 square feet. Flip to page 2. You can see that the subject property has responded to both requests for information, is therefore compliant with the Act. Subject sale history, there's no sales relevant for analysis. Subject property leases are a bit dated, but they're shown here on the bottom of page 2. One's a 30-year lease and the other is a 15-year lease. The range there is $13.25 to $14. If you flip to page 3, you can see the rent comparables that I've utilized. So I've tried to select a similar type of retail space along similar type of routes, high traffic Henderson Highway, while this is north of Chief Peguis Trail, there still is a lot of traffic on Henderson. And I've tried to reflect that in the rental comparables used. The range that we show here is $12 upwards of $22.66. Page 4, you'll see there is 2 income streams in place for this particular property. The first one is a restaurant income stream, which is the triple Bs, and if you, just for visual purposes, if you flip to page 7, you can kind of see that there are 3 buildings on site here. The building where the cursor or little tab is indicated, that's the restaurant, and then there is a small strip type building that's used for the real estate offices, and a smaller building that's also used by the real estate offices. But again, back to page 4, you're looking at the restaurant in isolation. 5,500 square feet. The model applied rent is $14.55 for a total potential rent of $80,025. 3% vacancy allowance for an effective gross income of $77,624. 2% expense, non-recoverable expense allowance given, and shortfall at $750 a square foot. The net operating income we arrive at is $74,834 with a cap rate of 7.5 for the restaurant portion. So total capitalized and rounded at $998,000 for the restaurant. The other income stream is for the office section. So the 2 buildings, they've been combined into one premise at 5,800 square feet, used by the same tenant, which is Royal LePage. And And again, the rental rate applied is $14.45, which is close to what was applied at the restaurant. 10 cents out. Yeah, $14.55 versus $14.45, so the rents are pretty tight between the two spaces. Potential rent there, $83,810. The office portion gets a 5.5% vacancy allowance for an effective gross income of $79,200. Non-recoverable expense allowance given at 2% and shortfall at $7 a square foot for a net operating income of $75,383. Cap rate used on the office portion is 6.7% for a total capitalized and rounded value at $1.125 million. Again, the pictures are shown here, aerial view and a map view, just to show the various buildings on site and to show that the parking is adequate for the use there. Page 8, you see some street view of the restaurant, Triple B's, and then you can see the real estate offices in the other two buildings. Page 9 is the income and expense mailer. Again, attached is the financial statements. In this instance, we don't show any recoveries for management. But there is $4,200 in the non-recoverable allowance, and again, we would suggest that you would remove the leasing commissions there. Again, we've got cap rate information on page 16. For this particular property, we've got one restaurant stream, which is not shown on here, and one office stream, which is OFS shown on here. And the range is between 6.2 and 7.3 for the office space in suburban areas. Page 17 is just some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. I won't go through that stuff, and I won't go through the addenda again, as I've already covered it previously. That is the end of my presentation for this property. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
2020, Corridon had both retail component and an office component, and they were combined together into one valuation model, correct?
Correct, yeah.
1700 Corridon had a retail component and an office component, and they were combined into one.
Correct.
5. But the subject property is not.
In this instance, no.
So what is the difference in the treatment of the property?
Basically, when I looked at it, I kind of looked at it as they're very distinct components. Like if you were to drive into the Triple B's, you can almost avoid the Royal LePage stuff completely. It is on site, but it's not, like, they're kind of distinct when you look at the aerial view of the property. You've got the office stuff to one side and you've got the restaurant stuff to the other side. There may be an argument that could be made for collapsing the income streams down into one, but in this instance, I've left it as the model is generated at 2 income streams.
So to that point, it's a separate building, correct?
Correct.
And the separate building for 1700 and 2020 Corridon as well?
Correct.
The short, or rather the expense allowance of 2%. So if I add, if I add the two streams together, it comes to about $3,100 roughly, correct? The allowance at 2%. 1584 and 1552.
Yep, 3136.
Okay, and our single point in time reference indicates non-recoverables of $12,426, roughly 4 times as much.
If you were to include the leasing commissions, yes, 16,626, yeah.
Okay, those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Stevens?
Well, yeah, my question was also related to the fact that these have been split. And because there were restaurants and some of the other properties that were not having this similar cap rate to the restaurant here. Although, as you point out, there really isn't a restaurant shown, restaurants aren't really shown on the cap chart, are they?
No,
No.
no, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, you responded to the previous question, so I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I'm good.
Okay, I just have one question. It's got here in the financial statement that ends December 31st, 2017. It's got the rent of $151,000, but you're showing rent in total of $163,000.
1 second.
So I'm just wondering, you know, you look at the, you ask for the questionnaire to be completed.
Yep.
And, you know, they send in a financial statement, so I'm just wondering why there is a discrepancy.
Yeah, so, I mean, with the leases that are in place, again, they're old leases. Like, one is a 30-year lease on a restaurant. So if you're trying to establish a market value, you shouldn't rely on something that was negotiated and signed 30 years ago. You do kind of have to look at what would a typical rent for a restaurant in the market be as of the reference date, not in 30 years prior, or even 20 plus years prior. That was kind of when I was reviewing the subject property leases and I was reviewing the modeled rents, that was my kind of look at it. I thought that the model was being fairly reasonable considering the age of those leases, but yeah, like there's also a distinction too if you're doing an appraisal between leased fee and fee simple. And lease fee would be to use the leases that are in place, and fee simple would be to look to the market to try to establish a rent range.
Well, this is like a pool hall, isn't it? This is a pool hall, and it's got a small restaurant.
Yeah, like they serve
Yeah.
pub food
Yeah.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that and drinks. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And the other one is the Royal LePage.
Correct. Yeah, yeah.
So, Royal LePage is classified as a office building now?
Yeah, in this instance,
Yeah.
it's tagged as an office.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So-
space that they occupy is tagged as office space.
So, why wouldn't the pool hall, you know, restaurant, I mean, it's a small restaurant,
Yeah.
you know, and why wouldn't it be the same sort of rate, or, you know, vice versa?
Well, I mean, there's all the kitchen
Yeah.
amenities that would
Okay.
be included, and like the buildings, if you're looking at the space that Royal LePage occupies, I don't think it would be fair to say that it's similar to the space that's occupied by Triple B's because of the equipment and the machinery that go along with the restaurant. But I mean, even to the restaurant being small, I mean, it's over 5,000 square feet. It's not a tiny CRU.
Mhm.
It's a fairly decent
You know,
size.
maybe a quarter, you know, maybe you've been inside it?
I have, yeah, I have, yeah. Well, I mean, like.
Sounds like you hang
but
around
again-
No.
But again, it's when you're analyzing the lease of that property, you wouldn't try to or provide a distinction in the areas between the dining area and the pool hall area. You look at it as an overall lease rate for the building, right, so.
And this property right now, with the last appeal, it's at the municipal board, is it not?
I don't have that information with me,
Okay.
it may be, yeah.
Mr. Smith can probably tune us into that figure. Anyways, Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So 1873 Henderson Highway, just, I think it's informative to look at the cover page of my brief. You can see the restaurant tenant to the right-hand side, and then the Royal LePage tenant to the left. Now, if you look at the building, its current use inside is, it's built out as office space, fairly wide open, from what I understand. And did see at one point, the other building, I believe, was a Robbins or something of that nature that is also used
Years ago.
years ago, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's used by Royal LePage as office space as well. Looking at them, they're retail buildings. The use itself, yes, they're using it currently as an office tenancy, but what we're looking at here is retail, and even if it wasn't, in looking at the properties that we just looked at, it should be combined into an overall look at the property as was done with 2020 and 1700 Court, and with much more significant office space and truly dedicated office space. Whether the parking is in front of the Royal LePage or the restaurant tenancy is somewhat immaterial. There's enough parking for both, certainly. The tenancy, so Royal LePage is franchise, obviously. Depends on the success of that tenant, and so they're in place. Triple Bs, more importantly, local operator, not a national chain, nothing of that nature. These places do tend to come and go. I know this one has been there for a little bit, but things can change very rapidly, and then they would be faced with re-tenanting the space. Looking at the lease as it was mentioned, so the original lease for the restaurant space was struck in 1997. That does not mean that the rate that is paid in 2017 was ascribed in 1997. It wasn't. They had a renewal at market rental rates in 2017, as shown on the city's brief, page number 15, so September 1, 2017. They started paying $14 a square foot for the next 10 years. Now, I imagine there's also some steps involved in that lease over that time frame. So the rent is right up to date at $14 a square foot. There's no aspect of it that was struck in 1997. Royal LePage is on a step-up lease beginning in 2011 and running for 10 years through 2021, so right through the valuation date. So the leases in place are indicative of market rent. The step-ups in Royal LePage are intended to account for any changes in market over that time frame. Looking at the actual valuation, so page number 9 summarizes the leases in addition to the rent roll at the back of the brief, which gives you a bit more detail. And we have an income stream of $153,850 at full occupancy. Looking at the rental comparables as provided, the $14 rate as well as $13.25 are certainly supported by the market material. And again, I take the point about leased fee versus fee simple valuation. So what we do, obviously, in coming up with these market valuations, which are intended to be fee simple, is look at the rent in place and whether it is representative of market or not, which is why we compare it to the market rents. We look at the time frame of them. Does it carry forward beyond the valuation date into the next cycle, etc. It's very clear that the rents here are reflective of the space that we're looking at as it stands. So it is fee simple. The vacancy stats and expense allowance are shown on page 11 and 12. And we can move on to the final valuation. So the subject property, again, any investor looking at the purchase of the property, it's a single title, it's a single roll number, you're buying the entire property, you're not buying one income stream and a separate income stream. You would look at this as a retail property with one office tenancy within it, which wouldn't change the cap rate that you would apply downwards in reference to the office tenant. It would probably make you think, are there other office tenants out there that I can backfill that space with for 5,000 or 6,000 square feet on that area of Henderson, more so than a lower cap rate. So Our cap rate study again is on page number 14. We have a few office comp caps just for information purposes. We're not relying on those in any sense, just providing background material. But again, the study points towards a cap rate of 7.5% being reasonable for the subject property. And we've used that in our valuation, which gives us a value of $1,786,000. And again, if you look at the back of the brief, as with all of the briefs here today, the very last part of it is a decision before the Board of Revision in the 2020 cycle with regard to 1169 Sherwin Road, which specifically refers to the inclusion of the 5% non-recoverable expense in the decision, as well as the 2% allowance, if you look at the brief itself, which is provided following up. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Just one question. So typically when they're signing a lease, at the onset of the lease, when they're establishing step-ups throughout the course of the lease, are you suggesting that it would be normal for them to not set those step-ups at the onset, but they would be reviewed each time that a step-up or a renewal comes into play? Is that typically?
When you come to a renewal, yes, if you're, so if you sign, let's say you sign a five-year lease with 2 options to renew for a further 5 years, your step-ups would be in the first 5 years to account for any rise in the market over that time frame. And then upon renewal, it'll read renewal as of market rates at that time period. So it's not a set amount at renewal time, it's what the market is.
Okay, so what you're saying here, when you're referencing the rent roll, is that when it shows September 1st, 2017, that would have been a renewal date for this lease, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay, no other questions, thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Just the question of office versus retail for the Royal LePage portion of this property. So what you're saying is that this was built as neighborhood retail, and now, I mean, it is being used as an office, but was this ever, to your knowledge, was there ever anything else in there? I know you're saying there was a Robin's Donut up on the corner, but.
Yeah, the small little building is. I don't want to venture to say what was
You're
there
not sure,
prior
yeah,
to
okay.
2006.
I'm just, yeah, it doesn't look like something that would normally be built for office space. It looks more like it's a storefront, yeah, grocery store almost, yeah. Okay, that's it, thanks.
Thank you. Tracy?
No questions.
Okay, I don't think I have, other than you can confirm that the 2018, is that the municipal board?
Yes, we have appealed that as the appellant.
Okay, and you took it there.
Yes.
Summations?
No, thank you.
No?
No, thank you.
All right, I think that concludes our business this afternoon. So thank you both very kindly. And results very soon.